yeah, the thing I wanted to show off. Let me go back to picture-in-picture mode. Guinea Pig Dan recently got a copy of a Lennon compilation album. It's called Shaved Fish. There's many John Lennon compilations, but this is the only one that John released during his lifetime in 1975, and it's got a very interesting cover where like every song that's on the album is illustrated. Does it say who illustrated the cover? Let me see. I just want to give proper credit to the artist that did this. Ray Kohara was the art director for the album, and the illustrations were made by Michael Bryan. The cover is divided into 12 rectangles, one for each of the 11 songs in the LP, and one for the album title, written in Bruce Mikita font, known as Novel Open. The album name originates from the Japanese food katsuo bushi, a kind of dried fish. So we can thank Michael Bryan for doing the illustrations. This is the front cover. You'll notice one of them is censored for a good reason, but here you have like 11 John Lennon songs all illustrated here. I should also shout out the back cover as well. Does it say the illustrator in the corner here? I thought it... Oh yeah, there we go. Illustrations Michael... It says so on the back cover of the album. This is... Obviously I'm looking at the LP version, not the CD, which is all shrunken down, but the back cover is a box of, I guess, fish shavings. And I did put the kanji here in Google Translate. You'll see the number 2 here. I checked. This is supposed to be ni, the number 2 in Japanese, not the katakana ni, which looks kind of identical to the kanji. There it says ounce or ounce. I think Google Translate basically says that this translates to 2 ounces or something. I wanted to rank all these illustrations. Here on the cover, the songs are like organized in like kind of a random order, but I wanted to go over them in like chronological when they were actually released. Yeah, first illustration is right here, 1969, Give Peace a Chance. Now, I'm going to describe each song. So, Give Peace a Chance, this was John and Yoko. It's actually explained in their Beatles song, The Ballad of John and Yoko. Because Yoko Ono was an immigrant from Japan to the UK or something, or I don't remember if she went to New York first and then moved to the UK. I don't remember, but she was an immigrant, and John had divorced Cynthia after the Two Virgins incident. But I think UK law at the time didn't allow John and Yoko to get married, but then one of their assistants, Peter Brown, found a loophole where they could get married in Gibraltar in Spain. So they got married there, and then they went to Amsterdam. They announced to the media, oh, we're going to have an event in our hotel. And then the media went there, and it was John and Yoko in a bed, and John saying, we're going to protest the Vietnam War, and we want to do it peacefully, so we'll do it in this bed for our honeymoon. And they basically just took a bunch of press questions for like a week. And while in this bed, John recorded what is probably one of the most famous peace anthems, Give Peace a Chance. And let me compare this to the single cover that was released in 1969. I got here on Wikipedia. If I go to Give Peace a Chance. The original cover was these weird plastic things with tape loops in them, and I saw a video explaining the reason why John and Yoko chose the name Plastic Ono Band was an idea of like, what if you had machines playing music? You know, this is back in the 60s before we had generative AI bullshit. It's very weird if you don't know what the idea was supposed to be. It's like you're not going to know what the hell this is supposed to be. But I like that for the illustration, I'm not sure what medium this is supposed to be, if it's a painting or a pastel drawing or something, but you'll see that there's a lot of whites, blues, pinks, and I guess black for hair and stuff, but that's the general color scheme he does. So it feels very pastelish. It almost feels like if you see those postcards for like the 50s or 60s where it looks kind of washed out and grainy. That's what it kind of reminds me of. You could like slap this on the internet and put a funny quote above John Lennon's head and make it into a meme or something. I actually have a tier thing. Here we go. I like how Michael Bryan represents Give Peace a Chance. I guess I'll put this in, I don't know, A category. I forgot to mention that Shaved Fish only plays the first minute of Give Peace a Chance, which stops out at the second round of verses with bye bye, bye bye, and then the end of the album plays an excerpt of a live performance of the song at the 1972 1-to-1 concert. However, the CD booklet prints the song's full lyrics, so if you ever wondered what John's nonsense lyrics were supposed to be, here you go. The next song is Cold Turkey. For those of you who don't know, cold turkey refers to like when you try to quit a drug, but you still have addiction and you can't stand it. John and Yoko, for a brief time, got addicted to heroin. Obviously, we know the Beatles did a lot of drugs. They went from like, I think, smoking pot. John then went from pot to like LSD. And then while with Yoko, he got addicted to heroin or something. But they got off of it, but it was really hard. And so he wrote a song called Cold Turkey. I think he presented it to the Beatles, but the Beatles said no. This is not not something they want to sing about, especially since Paul McCartney, I think, he had gotten in trouble for saying in an interview that they smoked pot. Remember, this is the 60s where, marijuana was frowned upon much more than today. For some reason, Michael Bryan, instead of like showing John, I don't know, on heroin or drugs or something, or like in bed, not the bed in for peace, but like just struggling with addiction, instead he just drew John in like, I guess what is supposed to be snow or something? I don't know. It doesn't really convey what the song is about. John struggling with drug addiction. I don't know. I would probably put this in C or D just because it's not really clear what this is supposed to be. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's drawn nicely, but it's a little too generic for me. Just seeing John taking a walk in the snow or something. Something I wish I had mentioned. Cold Turkey is one of John's most intense sounding tracks, and he moans and screams for the song's last 2 minutes. So seeing this song depicted as him taking a walk in the snow is a bit underwhelming. Granted, drawing a drug-addicted John going through withdrawal or anything directly referencing drugs would have probably been vetoed by John or the record label. Maybe Bryan could have painted his own version of the Cold Turkey single artwork, which has an x-ray of John's head, but that might also come off too freaky, so maybe Bryan didn't have much of a choice. Next, Instant Karma. This is 1970. This is after the Beatles broke up. I don't. Let me check the dates for the releases of John Lennon's singles. So Give Peace a Chance and Cold Turkey in 1969. Give Peace a Chance, July 4th. Oh wow, Independence Day in America, 1969. Cold Turkey was October 20th. And I remember John also played Cold Turkey live during the Live Peace in Toronto event. And then Instant Karma, here we go, February 6th, 1970. Oh, I forgot to show, I want to show the covers of the original singles. The single version of Cold Turkey that came out in 1969 was an x-ray of John's head. Again, this is also really weird, but I can kind of understand, John struggling with drug addiction and he goes to the doctor and gets an x-ray or something. I can kind of see that. I guess, since it's the 60s, maybe they didn't want to do something that was too explicitly about drugs, even though, that's what the title is. But Instant Karma, like, you compare the single cover here, where it's just Lennon Instant Karma, pretty boring, but then you look at Shaved Fish and you get this. A jar of Instant Karma. It's kind of bizarre. It's better than the original single cover, I'll have to say. I don't know, depicting Instant Karma is something you get in a jar, and you have John's face on the label right there, staring at you, judging you. Just for the weirdness of this illustration, I guess I put it in maybe A tier or B tier. I don't know. B tier, whatever. I mean, if I was to illustrate Insta Karma, like, I don't know, someone told me, oh, draw something John Lennon related, I'd probably just look at the music video where John is performing with a bunch of people. And if I remember, like, there's a funny John Lennon quote that goes something like, I wrote it for breakfast, I recorded it for lunch, and now we're serving it for dinner. Because if you look at the dates, he recorded it the 27th of January, 1970, and then released it, like, nearly 10 days later on the 6th of February. So this was a very fast recorded single. Now that I think about it, Instant Karma being rushed might be the reason why the UK sleeve of the single is so plain. There just wasn't time to make an interesting image. The US version of the single at least slapped a photo of John on it. Actually, if he released that in February 1970, that would actually be after the Beatles split, but before they announced it, which was a couple months later when Paul released McCartney 1. The Beatles were releasing some solo projects here and there. Ringo's Sentimental Journey, George Harrison doing Wonderwall music and electronic sounds. But the next single John did was Mother. The Mother single was just the same cover as Plastic Ono Band, his first post-Beatles album. But for Shaved Fish, you have what looks like, I'm gonna guess this is John Lennon in drag, and a close-up of his face crying. Now, if you don't know Beatles lore, John Lennon's mother, Julia, I think his parents left him when he was like 5 and he had to live with his Aunt Mimi and Uncle George. And then when John was a teenager, his mother came back and they started to try and reconnect again, but then she was killed by an off-duty police cop driving drunk or something, I think. Correction, Beatles Bible says that the driver wasn't drunk. It was very traumatic for John when he was a teenager, and when he met Paul McCartney, Paul's mother died of cancer, I think, when he was like 14 or something. Both John and Paul kind of trauma bonded together because they both lost their mothers at very young ages. And the song Mother is basically after the Beatles broke up, I think John Lennon went into like primal scream therapy or something, him and Yoko together. And the primal scream is like a theory that something about reliving childhood traumas that you keep within yourself or something. He wrote the song Mother to basically be about how he felt being abandoned by his parents. Mother, you had me, but I never had you. Father, you left me, but I never left you. Now, of course, a lot of people kind of say John is a bit of a hypocrite because he left Julian Lennon after he divorced Cynthia and married Yoko and had very little contact with Julian until John's death. I think John kind of realized how fucked up his behavior was a bit, because after singing about his mother and his father, he then says, children don't do what I've done. I think maybe deep down John realized what he did to his son was kind of fucked up. I wish he tried to connect with Julian before he was shot. But anyway, this cover is just very strange. I don't think that's supposed to be Julia Lennon, his mother. I think that's supposed to be John in drag. I don't know. It's very bizarre, but it is fitting for the song, I will say. So on my tier list, I guess I put it in maybe mid. I don't know. I'm not sure if I want to put it in C or B. Like, I'll put it in B just because it's really strange having John in drag, but him crying, you know, it does fit the theme of the song. His next single was Power to the People, released March 12th, 1971 in the UK, March 22nd in the US. Now, the single cover is John doing a hand power gesture, wearing some sort of construction hat, it looks like, with some kanji that I can't read. Maybe I'll translate that later. I just looked it up. The kanji is Han, meaning to betray, rebel, or rebellion. So, rebel, rebellion, it's fitting for John's protest hat. I guess it's John trying to pose looking like a revolutionary or something. I don't know if that's supposed to be a military jacket. I don't know. The image isn't very high quality, but it's just John posing for the camera. And then for the illustration for Shaved Fish, it looks kind of like the Declaration of Independence, and the writing says, "We the people of the United States, in order to further advance the causes of international artistry and human relations, do ordain one John Lennon with a most prized and coveted green card, which shall enable said Lennon to remain within the territorial boundaries of these here United States of America." Okay, for those of you who don't know, when John Lennon immigrated from the UK to America, the Nixon administration and the FBI started to spy on him, and they tried to get him deported based on his being arrested for drug possession in the UK back in 1968, I think. I find it kind of funny that John Lennon is often criticized by other left-wingers that his bed-ins for peace was basically ineffective and not like real activism or something. And I can kind of understand that criticism, and obviously, you know, saying imagine no possessions, but he's a millionaire. But then you read into how John Lennon was being stalked and harassed by the Nixon administration and the FBI, and it's like, even though John Lennon was acting kind of like a clown, you know, doing Nuts for Peace when he was Newtopia and everything, his clown act still scared Richard Nixon, and Nixon wanted him out of the country. So the reference to the green card, obviously John Lennon was struggling to try and stay in the United States, and he finally got his green card, I think, in 1976. But here, I don't know, it's kind of boring, honestly, just a bunch of text. Power to the People, it's like kind of John taking back his song Revolution, where he said, you say you want a revolution, but count me out. But now he's saying, you say what you want a revolution, well, let's get it on right away. I mean, I guess it is kind of fitting with the theme, making it look like the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution or something with the fancy writing, but it's just not very exciting to look at. I don't know, I'd put that in the lowest tier for how illustrations go. Yeah. I don't know, maybe I should bump Cold Turkey up to a C. You know, just to be above Power to the People. So anyway, next illustration. Okay, so Imagine. The release of Imagine as a single is really weird. I remembered reading that in America they released it along with the album, I think, but in the UK they didn't release it until John released Shaved Fish in 1975. That's why the UK single here says released as a single for the first time in the UK. And it's just a picture of John looking at the camera. And then the American single, I think it's this. It's John at the piano. I'm not sure if this is the American cover or if this is a cover for a different country or something. I don't know. But between the UK cover and the US cover, I like the one of John at the piano because it's very reminiscent of the music video for Imagine, where it's John at his big piano and Yoko Ono is walking around opening the curtains or the blinds or whatever in the room that they're in where John's playing. But the way Michael Bryan interpreted this, he just did John's face fading in the clouds, and it does kind of look reminiscent of the cover of Imagine, the actual album. Let me type that in. It's like a grainy picture of John with a cloud in front of him. Like, not the most exciting album cover. I mean, having John's face, you know, fading in the sky, like, it kind of is a little bit more interesting. And, you know, seeing the clouds in his glasses there, it kind of reminds me of, like, the original idea for the cover for Imagine. John Lennon wanted a face shot of him, and his eyes would have clouds in them. I guess they considered it too freaky, so instead they took a photo of John's face, where it's grainy and has a cloud over his face. But I would have thought it would have been better if they just had a picture of John's face with clouds in the glasses rather than his actual eyes, because then if you see clouds in his eyes, it looks like he has some sort of eye disease. It's simple, but it looks kind of neat with Lennon just fading into the background. And so I'd probably put that in, maybe B category. It looks nice, but it's not the best drawing. You'll see what I consider the best drawing out of these in a bit. Then we have Happy Christmas, War is Over. Let me see when this was released as a single. The single cover is John and Yoko with the Harlem Community Choir. They're the kids that sing behind John, singing the chorus, "A very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Let's hope it's a good one. Without any fear." You probably hear this a lot on the radio during Christmas time, along with Paul McCartney's Wonderful Christmas Time, which people will probably say is a horrible Christmas time because of all the electronic sounds on it. But this was released, in December 1971 in the US, but then for some reason they delayed it a year in the UK in 1972, the same year John would have released his very political album Sometime in New York. You don't want to release was considered John's worst LP along with this single. It explains here that in like 1968 or 69, John and Yoko bought a bunch of billboards and put a slogan, "War is over if you want it," as a protest against the Vietnam War. Obviously, some people got upset declaring war is over when there's still wars going on, but you see in very little text in the bottom it says, "if you want it." So the artwork on Shaved Fish is just some sort of war airplane with a Christmas ornament on it. It's alright. If they were going to draw the entire choir there, it would probably be way too much detail, and since this is on an album cover, it'd be shrunken down to a very small size. But this is simple and gets the point across, so I guess I put it in B tier. So the next song is going to be one of John's most controversial ones. There's a reason I censored it. Here we go. "Woman is the N-word of the world." Yeah, John, obviously this song got a lot of controversy when John released it on his album Sometime in New York City. That was in 1972, and in 1975, I guess John decided he'd want to provoke people yet again, and included this one song on his Best Hits album. The artwork here, I've censored it, but it's a woman covered in a checkerboard blanket. Her body is here naked, and then you have bullets flying above her, but they look like they could either be bullets or lipstick? I'm not sure. Now, if you want to know why John Lennon chose such a controversial title, it's actually a phrase that Yoko Ono said in like an interview in the 60s, talking about feminism, and John had a pretty bad past with how he treated his first wife and other people. He admitted in a 1980 interview with Playboy that he used to hit people, including women. YouTuber Lars Land has a video on the Beatles and domestic violence that goes into way more detail than I could. That's worth checking out. I just want to mention this because while John often sang about peace and love and touched upon feminism in some of his songs, he fell short of his ideals, and I don't want to pretend that he was a flawless activist. No one is a perfect activist. I mean, just look at the recent news of what's come out about people like Cesar Chavez or Noam Chomsky. And I think it's important to acknowledge John's shortcomings and learn from his mistakes and our own mistakes. I guess John, getting together with Yoko Ono, wanted to try and correct that, and so he wrote this song with Yoko. Obviously, he offended a lot of people. The original single cover, it's like rather kind of boring looking. It's just John on top of Yoko. I don't remember why it's Nova. I think that might have been the name of a certain magazine or something, if we read the rest of the article. Oh, the reason why it says Nova is because... go away. Is because that was the magazine where Yoko Ono first used that phrase, so that's why. Not exactly my favorite illustration, but, reading some of the lyrics to the song, we force women to paint their faces and dance. If she won't be a slave, we don't think she loves us. If she's real, she's trying to be a man. While putting her down, we pretend she's above us. When she's young, we kill her will to be free. While telling her not to be so smart, we put her down for being so dumb. I remember, reading a John Lennon biography, Come Together by John Wiener. I know, unfortunate last name, and he showed some of the contemporary reactions, and one review of the song basically said this is just a bunch of accusations, and in a song that's supposed to be feminist, John doesn't actually say anything positive about women. He just says how badly women are treated. I kind of get it, but on the other hand, it's you look at Red Pillars and Looks Maxers and the way they treat women badly, it's kind of maybe some of the lyrics in this song kind of had a point. Let's see, my tier thing, not exactly my favorite illustration. I just put it at the bottom. I don't know. John, for whatever reason, just decided to provoke people with his Best Hits album, bringing up this song that, I don't know, I think some Lennon fans would rather want to forget. I feel like I didn't go into as much detail as I could about how this song was illustrated and why I gave it a low ring. The woman having her head covered in a war zone with lipstick-looking bullets does convey what the song's about. The lipstick bullets could have been an allusion to the line, "We make her paint her face and dance." But on the other hand, while the illustration is well drawn, it doesn't appeal to me as much because this isn't one of my favorite John Lennon songs, and I like the more whimsical illustrations like Whatever Gets You Through the Night and Instant
and Karma more. I don't know what sort of direction Michael Bryan was given to illustrate this song. Replicating the cover of the single, which is just a mock magazine cover, probably wouldn't work, and redrawing the illustration for the song from the cover of Sometime in New York City probably also wouldn't work, since it's a pretty graphic illustration of a man assaulting a woman and cutting her stomach with a sword. Kind of like with Cold Turkey, I guess Bryan was in a rock and a hard place and just did the best he could. Oh, and for some reason, the Shaved Fish version of this song cuts out the middle verses, but still prints the full lyrics of the song in the booklet. Now, listening to the album, I thought the song skipped a few lyrics, and the Wikipedia article for Shaved Fish confirmed I wasn't hearing things. I'm not sure why John chose to edit this song down. And then we have Mind Games. Now, after Sometime in New York City, obviously that album did very poorly. John kind of decided for the next album to kind of take a step backwards, and he did an album called Mind Games. John apparently disliked that album and said it was too directionless. However, the single Mind Games, the artwork here for Shaved Fish is just a replica of the single cover, if I go back to Wikipedia. Basically the same picture, but now it's done as a pretty artwork thing. And if you're wondering what the hell's wrong with John's head up there, I think that's supposed to be Yoko's face on top of his hair. And if we compare the album cover, the actual LP, you'll see it's basically John Lennon standing stranded with Yoko's face off in the distance. And so they basically just took this photo of Yoko, Photoshop, well, they wouldn't have Photoshop back in the 70s, but they basically took that photo of Yoko looking like a landscape and plastered that on top of John's head. And it's very strange, and, a lot of people kind of say it's symbolic of, basically John was kind of obsessed with Yoko. The irony is, though, that after Mind Games was released, if I remember correctly, after Nixon was reelected, John got so angry at basically his sworn enemy winning re-election that he slept with some other musician's wife, and that basically caused strain between him and Yoko, and they tried to do marriage counseling, I think, but then eventually Yoko basically kicked John out. It started the Lost Weekend period from, I think, early 1973 to the beginning of 1975, where John just lived on his own, and Yoko sent a personal assistant, May Pang, to basically be John's proxy girlfriend or something. Most Lennon biographies, I think, usually describe the Lost Weekend as just John getting drunk and getting into trouble and everything, but May Pang has a photo book saying that actually it was much happier than a lot of biographies portray. So that is kind of the irony. Mind Games itself, I think, is a pretty awesome song, and the B-side, Meat City, which is actually the last song on the album, on the LP, is also pretty good. And there's a little secret. If you play the single version of Meat City, there's a backwards message at the beginning, and if you play it backwards, it says, "Check the album."
Check the album.
And then if you play the album version of Meat City, there's another backwards message, and if you play it backwards, it says, "Fuck a pig." Maybe he was inspired by the people saying if you play Beatles songs backwards, it'll tell you Paul McCartney is dead. So I guess John decided to have some fun and put his own backwards message and mess with people. And then they find a message that doesn't really mean anything. Yeah, I would rank this maybe around B tier. I don't know, I'm almost tempted to say A tier. It's a simple drawing, but it looks nice. Yeah, so, I don't know, I guess A tier. Then we go to what's called the Lost Weekend period, and John recorded what I consider my favorite solo album of his, Walls and Bridges. Let me see the date for when the singles for Walls and Bridges were released. He released 2, Whatever Gets You Through the Night with Elton John, and Number 9 Dream. Number 9 Dream is my favorite John Lennon song, even over Imagine. So the cover for Whatever Gets You Through the Night is just John with multiple sunglasses on his face, making a smug-looking expression with his lips.
If you get the LP version of John's album, Walls and Bridges,
there's different pictures of John, different selfies of him looking at the camera, and then there's some where he's silly wearing multiple pairs of glasses, and there's one where John is sticking out his tongue, and basically what this drawing is supposed to be, I guess, combining several of them, taking the one where John's wearing multiple glasses, taking the one where John's sticking his tongue out, and you get this really goofy looking drawing here. This is probably one of my favorite illustrations. Whatever Gets You Through the Night is a pretty fun song between him and Elton John. I guess after people hated Sometime in New York City, that album, for being overly political, and then Mind Games comes out and John felt it was directionless. Now he comes out with kind of a really fun song. I think, if I remember, I think Walls and Bridges was his one album that hit number 1 or something. But yeah, this is one of my favorite illustrations, so I definitely put it in S tier. So the next one was
Number 9 Dream. Now, for those of you who don't know, John Lennon had a thing for the number 9. He was born on October 9th. He has a song called One After 909. One of the versions of Revolution, there's Revolution the single, Revolution 1, which is on the White Album, and then Revolution 9, which is his weird experimental track that's also on the White Album. I don't know if there's any other 9s. John's younger son, Sean, he was born on October 9th, on John's own birthday, so that there's another number 9. He really liked the number 9, and so he incorporated that into a song, Number 9 Dream. And it's one of my favorite John Lennon songs, and I think Michael Bryan did a very interesting interpretation, showing John sleeping, and you have a window. Like, it's kind of strange. You actually have a window behind John on whatever gets you through the night, although the curtains are missing, and then you have the window comes back. I guess you could assume since this is a dream, the curtains just, something John's mind is making up. I don't know. You have the number 9 on the walls, the number 9 in the cloud there. Very strange, and I would say it's my other favorite illustration.
I forgot to mention the back cover of the Imagine album also has John lying down with the cloud above him, and that may have influenced Michael Bryan's illustration for Number 9 Dream.
So I would put this in S tier. Did I show what the Number 9 Dream single looks like? Oh, well, it's just a pretty boring photo of John. Like, Whatever Gets You Through the Night at least had John with those multiple glasses. It looks silly. Here it's just John looking, just staring into your soul. Big improvement over the original single artwork. Let's see what people are saying in OBS Studio. Ken, that reminds me of when I dreamed making an OC that was taking inspiration from the Philippines. I don't need machines made of plastic when everybody has microplastic. Yeah. Suspending a baby hundreds of miles above the sidewalk in a cheap metal cage was okay. We really do live in a society. Oh, silly furball. Hello. All right, this I can make the exception to being an upset over an image. What the Evangelion is this? Were you reacting to the Number 9 Dream or Woman is the N-word of the world? I can't tell, Ken. I'm reading this a bit too late. I was thinking of putting binary or hexadecimal in my work. 9 is his lucky number. Yeah, John really liked the number 9. I guess I could, I don't know, take a screenshot and post this for Blue Sky. Like, this is how I rank all the artwork. Put that in.
Here's one more thing I found after I did this stream. I was trying to find more information on Shaved Fish's cover artist, Michael Bryan, and see if he's still alive, and I found an auction website selling an alternative Shaved Fish cover Bryan designed. This cover is completely different from the final product, and is unlike any of John's other album covers, but it's very beautiful. It almost makes me think of a Leonardo da Vinci diagram. I'm not sure if the bug next to John's face is supposed to be a beetle or a firefly. You can see Yoko's face in one of the squares to the side, and John happens to be wearing an American flag shirt. I guess to symbolize his political activism and his fight to stay in the US. I can kind of see how this concept image being divided into squares could have evolved into the final cover, where it's all of John's songs divided into rectangles. It's too bad this concept art couldn't be used as the cover for a book, or the cover for a later compilation album like the John Lennon Collection from 1989, or Lennon Legend in 1997. I'm glad I found a hidden gem of unseen Lennon artwork. Anyway, look upon this tier list and despair! Thank you for watching.